Hello once again and welcome back to Light Lore. It's been a while since we've done one of these videos, but I thought since the season 4 has started, we might as well do it again and try and cover a lot of the stuff that we missed out in the last kind of season. So we did a lot of the major houses last time. We did the Lannisters, we did the Starks, we did the Baratheons, but we didn't do a lot of the minor houses. So I did say at the time that I would do like House Baelish, House Tarth, and all those kind of places. A lot of people who aren't involved in the War of the Five Kings, or at least aren't the kind of main chess pieces at least. And yeah, it's time to deliver on that promise with House Tarth. And it was kind of hard to find information on House Tarth. A lot of their history isn't really talked about. For example, their motto isn't even known. But I did manage to find enough stuff, did manage to scrape together enough information to make a video about them. And there was some information even I didn't know myself, because although Brienne does become a kind of central character later on, the history of the whole house isn't really kind of talked about in depth at all. And it's the same with a lot of the kind of minor houses, like House Baelish. There is some nods to it throughout the kind of series and books, but they're not really kind of one of the major houses, so it's not really discussed that much. It's more like in mentioning or just not at all. But anyway, House Tarth, here it is. And House Tarth occupy the island of Tarth, pretty good name, and they're a vassal house of House Baratheon. They're in kind of servitude to House Baratheon due to the fact that their island is so close to the Stormlands. The Stormlands is where the Baratheons' kind of home is. Like, obviously you have Stannis and you have Renly at different places, at least at the start of the novels, but like when Robert, Stannis and Renly were all kids, they were together and they were in the Stormlands, and that is why House Tarth is kind of indebted to the Baratheons, because they're the closest kind of major house, you know? It makes sense. I mean, a lot of kind of houses are that way. For example, the Karstarks are close to the kind of Starks, so they obviously have to be indebted to the Starks. It would make no sense being a Karstark and being indebted to the Lannisters, because the Lannisters are on the other side of fucking Westeros, so yeah, you normally go with the house that's closest to you in terms of who you're kind of a vassal house to. Lord Selwyn Tarth is the Lord of House Tarth, and he's not really mentioned that much. The only time in the show that he's mentioned is when Jaime says that Lord Selwyn's house are known for like holding sapphires, and obviously that's a lie. And so when Selwyn Tarth tries to give a reward of 300 dragons to get his daughter back, to say, well, you have rubies and sapphires, why are you giving us this much? Well, it's a lie anyway, so he doesn't have that much. So it kind of fucks Selwyn over in the long run. That's like one of the only kind of times it's mentioned, is when Jaime mentions it. But Lord Selwyn Tarth is the Lord of House Tarth, making Brienne the kind of next in line. She has had a brother and two sisters. The brother drowned at age 8 and the two sisters died in the cot. So she's the eldest. So automatically, even if the kind of children did survive or were never involved in those accidents, she would be like the favourite, because she would be auctioned off. Because since she's a girl, like Selwyn Tarth would have had to try and find a house for her to kind of meld onto or kind of join. So like Catelyn Stark, she had to go with the Starks for the purpose of just more land and kind of friendship, politics and that sort of thing. And a similar thing would have happened with Brienne if Brienne wasn't the way she is. As you probably know if you've read the books or seen the show, she's kind of a knight. She kind of like goes against the grain and doesn't really act feminine, which caused kind of a lot of problems when Selwyn Tarth did try and find her a match. There were several matches. The first match was to Brian Karen, and that did work out. She was pretty young at the time. I think she was like 8 years old, and it didn't work out in the end for the simple fact that Brian Karen and his whole family died. So that was kind of didn't work out. And then like the kind of newest marriage didn't work out because Brienne didn't do it because she could best the other guy in combat. Like he wanted her to be like kind of stereotypical wife from Westeros, and she says she would only do it if he could beat her in combat. He couldn't, so once she broke his nose, she also broke the kind of promise as well, and that was that. The only other person who you could kind of say she got close to would be Renly, but obviously that wasn't going to happen since he was already betrothed, and also because his house was so much higher up, or so higher up, compared to House Tarth. But even if she does stay a widow, and Selwyn dies before she's wed, she'll inherit House Tarth nonetheless. So she could be like the kind of widow lord of House Tarth. And since she's the only daughter, Selwyn couldn't really choose anybody else, unless he had a bastard that he legitimised. But that's not really discussed, and it's probably very unlikely. That said, in Feast for Crows, he is mentioned as being kind of womanizer, so it's possible that that could happen, but I don't see it happening in the future, to be honest. The only history that's mentioned is that Quentyn Tarth, I think he was like an ancestor of Selwyn, but Quentyn Tarth took part in a tourney, the Ashford tourney, in Ashford Hill, and won it. And that's all it really says. I think that's probably when the house was either created or came into its own and was like kind of more known to the major houses. But that's the only history. And other than that, all you can really do is look into the characters and talk about the characters that are presented at the present time, which is what we're going to do. But the Ashford tourney took place when Dunk and Eggs novels were set, so it was quite a long time ago, so it is kind of possible that that was the creation of the house. He won the tourney and in turn was kind of given the choice of a house, or given the opportunity to make a house, and that's not unheard of. House Clegane was founded because the Cleganes saved the Lannisters. The Lannister at that time from up in the line. In terms of recent events, you obviously have Brienne's journey, but you also have Andrew Tarth. And Andrew Tarth isn't really a major player. He's mentioned in the first Game of Thrones novel and the first series as someone who kind of takes over from Alistair Thorne. So when Alistair Thorne kind of stops training the new recruits of the Night's Watch, Andrew Tarth comes in and takes over. And that's pretty much all he does. He's not really mentioned at all apart from that. But he is mentioned, so it's worth saying that it's him, you know? It's worth saying that he's part of House Tarth because of his kind of appearance, as little as it may be. Although Brienne's in the books, it's also mentioning kind of a bit more of her backstory. You'll know her appearance if you've seen the show or read the books. She's noted as being kind of tall, flat-chested, and kind of ugly by Westerosi standards. George R. R. Martin said that she is the same height as Robert, so that kind of places her at like 6 foot, 7 foot in between that. And her outlook, as I've said before, is kind of more masculine. She's a knight, and she doesn't kind of take part in any courtmanship or anything like that. She kind of focuses more on the kind of combat aspects of life. Brienne's mother died when she was really young, so that's probably partly to blame, or partly the cause of why she is the way she is, because she had like kind of a more masculine influence on her life at that early age. I mentioned Gladden before. He was her brother who died and drowned when he was 8, and there's also the 2 sisters. So she's dealt with death her whole life, which probably helped with the whole kind of combat aspect. She wasn't kind of sheltered from that aspect, she wasn't kind of sheltered from death, she knew what it was like, she knew what happened. So that probably helped her when she killed her first man and stuff like that. It probably helped deal with that, and kind of, whereas other people would like have a hard time dealing with her first kill would have been less harder to deal with, since she'd already dealt with death at that young age, and especially with someone she knew so well, her brother. But that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the whole history of House Tarth. As I said, this is probably the hardest house to talk about the history of, because there's so little kind of to talk about. There's so little history, because although Brienne's kind of got her own chapters later on, the house itself isn't really talked about. But yeah, I tried my best. Hopefully the video does the house justice, and hopefully the video has enough content to warrant it being a video, you know. I had to scrape around the internet, I had to reread certain parts of the books to try and find information about the kind of House Tarth. But I think I found everything there is to find. If there's anything you know that I didn't mention, then certainly just say it in the comments. Help us out a little bit, because this was definitely one of the harder houses to find information on. But there you go. The next house is going to be House Baelish, and that should be an easier house to kind of talk about, since Baelish is so involved, and since he has a kind of more expanded history in his house. I've been Cipyaar. This has been Lightlaw. See you next time.